In a first-past-the-post system, each wing of politics needs to be united, otherwise it fails. The target is to get 325 seats, and if this is not achieved, then either you lose or you end up in a coalition with people with whom you may not have much in common. To win, if you haven't got 325, as David Cameron did, you end up entering a coalition that doesn't really represent what people wanted. If you put the coalition together before the election, then people know what you're selling to them. And it is true that all political parties are coalitions to some extent or another. So back in 2010, when I was first elected to Parliament, we had this conundrum. The Tories had 306 seats, Labour 258, the Lib Dems 57. No one could achieve a majority in Parliament. But David Cameron had an idea, a plan. To the Liberal Democrats, he made a, quote, big, open and comprehensive offer that would take us over the magic number and form a majority government, albeit in coalition. Well, today, with a mere 121 seats in Parliament, up against Labour's 172-seat majority, the Conservatives face yet another conundrum. There are 98 seats across the country where the Reform Party is in second place. 89 of those, the Labour Party is in second place. I'm not really worried about the ones where the Tories are in second place. It's the 89 where Labour's in second place. And it is decisively clear that the vote of the right is split, and that helps those who are opposed to what those of us in the Tory and Reform family believe. So if we want to pursue a Conservative agenda again, the answer to the conundrum is simple. We need to reunite the right. How do we do this? Well, it may surprise you, we take inspiration from David Cameron. We offer the Reform Party a big, open and comprehensive offer to stand aside in the 89 seats in which we came second to Labour, as well as, of course, in the 5 that they won. Bear in mind, Labour secured a 172 majority with a mere 33% of the vote. Now, that reminds you of how sensitive a first-past-the-post system is to a split wing of politics. And it mainly happened because people were determined to get rid of the Tories, not because there's any excitement about a Labour government. Indeed, before the election there wasn't, and since the Labour Party's disastrous and grubby start means it's improbable there'll be any enthusiasm for them at the next election. The reason they won was because we were divided. To win, we must unite. So whoever wins the Tory leadership election, which is going ahead full steam here, everywhere you look, there are Tory candidates walking around with their Praetorian Guard, with their lictors following them round. Whichever one of them it is, must work out how to approach reform with a long-term view of reuniting the Tory family. Only then can we hope to return to government at the next election and save the United Kingdom from the disaster that socialism always, invariably is. Let me know your views. Email mailmog@GB News. But I'm very pleased to be joined now by the Deputy Leader of Reform and Member of Parliament, Richard Tice. Now,
Jacob.
Richard, thank you very much for coming on. It's good to see you.
Great to be with you. You've left London and I've staged a coup. I'm in your seat.
Oh, you've taken over my... I know. I think lots of people prefer it when you present this hour, but for the moment I'm still presenting until I'm finally forced out. But ultimately, people like you and me share so many values, so many views about how we should be governed in common. There are, I accept, some people in the Tory party to the left of me. But if we're to achieve what you and I want, the type of economy we want, the type of society that we want, we need to unite and bring together the Tory family and the Reform family.
Yeah, well, I use the word coup because the truth is, Jacob, I think that what Reform is doing is we are essentially invoking a coup on the philosophy of conservatism, because too much of the Conservative Party just abandoned that in some new philosophy called con-socialism. You couldn't really tell the difference between the Tory party and the Labour Party. And you and I know, Jacob, that competition's a good thing. It makes everybody perform better. And look, Reform's got the momentum at the moment. I think hopefully you'd accept that the Tory brand is somewhat toxic. But you know, we can't do a deal with a party as broad a church as the Conservatives that is so broad. I mean, some of you are poles apart from each other. surely really what's got to happen, actually, Jacob, is the deal that has to happen is between elements of the Conservative Party that have to, in an amicable way, say, we need to part company, and the real Conservatives within the Tory party, like your good self and Lord Frost and others, you need to join Reform and help us reform the country.
I think the real difficulty with that is that the Tory party has the strong allegiance of 20% of the country, many of whom share my views that if you go around this party conference, and last year Nigel was here, he was lauded as he went round. Most of the members of the Tory party share the views you and I have, but they're not going to vote for another party. There is a tribal element of this, and that for Reform to win, it needs to win over that bit of the tribe, which will only vote for something that has Tory on the ballot paper. So the real effort is how to bring us together. And it seems to me that if we had in the House of Commons 89 Reform MPs, a Tory government would actually be shifted dramatically towards what I might call proper conservatism.
Oh, no, Jacob, we're much more ambitious. We want 326 Reform MPs.
Yeah,
and then, of course, we can...
You're not going to get them. That's the problem.
You have to be ambitious in life, and we are. The alternative is you actually accept our line of thinking, which you started off in your monologue, that actually, really what we should have is proportional representation, which works very well and means that you can have new parties with new ideas and give the electorate a greater choice, more democracy. That's a good thing. You support that, surely.
Richard, it's not more democratic, and it is the cry of weak parties. The Lib Dems only supported proportional representation once they were not in prospect of getting in government, and they had an opportunity at a Speaker's Conference in about 1919. They rejected it then because they thought they could govern. Your support for proportional representation is a sign, a promise that you can't win under the existing system. That's why we need to bring together those of us who agree on the philosophy of politics to try and make it work under the existing system.
Yeah, but the problem is, Jacob, is that much of your party doesn't agree with your philosophy of politics. They agree with completely different values on public spending, on net zero, on tax. They're all sort of soggy and gooey, and we can't have that. It's no good at all.
Well, look, I'm going to be talking later about net zero, which I think is doing a lot of damage. But what I'd say to that is there may be a few MPs in that category, but the overwhelming majority of the Conservative Party, the people here, the members who have been speaking at the members' events, are proper Conservatives.
And that's why so many are actually joining Reform. I think we're now well over 85,000, approaching 90,000 members. It'll be interesting seeing how many members vote in the leadership election later in the year in the Conservative Party. Look, we've got the momentum, Jacob, because we've got that real philosophy, and I think people trust us on that. And you know, lots of the leadership, lots of your leaders say they've lost the trust of the people.
Well, trust is important. Thank you very much, Richard. Always a pleasure to talk to you and admit and confess to my viewers that we're continuing the conversation we had watching England play Australia at Lord's on Friday, but equally inconclusively. Anyway, with me now is my panel, Telegraph columnist Tim Stanley and the trade unionist Andy Twelves. Andy, let me come to you first, because you obviously want to see a divided right. It's very helpful to the Labour Party. Helps Labour Party win on 33% of the vote.
I mean, yes and no, of course. You know, it is no secret that I'm undercover here at the Conservative Conference wearing my Tory blue. But I think it is an important thing for democracy to have a functioning opposition, which we don't have at the moment, obviously, because Rishi Sunak is kind of operating a bit of a ghost ship. But I think I would rather see a strong opposition in the Conservative Party to give, you know, the people of Britain a genuine chance of democracy and of seeing what the right have to offer. Obviously, I want that. Should
we learn from what happened in the 1980s to Labour? Because actually, Labour turned into the SDP effectively with Tony Blair, but as long as the SDP was around, they could not win elections. And so the Tories get massive majorities in 83 and 87, each time on a slightly lower share of the vote than they'd got in 79.
I think that's something worth noting, but if you look at Labour's time in opposition from 2010 to 2024, there wasn't really that kind of fraction out during the Corbyn years. A lot of the really good people in Labour, people like Morgan McSweeney and the Labour Together project, Keir Starmer, Steve Reid, these kind of people that really rebuilt the Labour Party from 2019 to what it is now, remained in the party, and they thought, we believe in this, we invest in it, and I think the Conservative Party would probably be better off doing that.
So if you take number of votes, people who actually voted, Corbyn did better in 2019 than Starmer did in 2024.
Yeah, but
that's not a real...
But we don't have proportional representation,
we don't,
Jacob,
nor
you know
do we
this.
want it. Tim, you're sympathetic to the Conservative Party and would like to see, Telegraph commentator, a government that is broadly conservative. How do you think we best go about it?
Well, I'm sympathetic to all furry animals. And look, there's an attitude around this conference that people are sort of thrilled at how badly things are going for Labour. But the reality is that their polling can sink as low, it can go all the way down to the floor, and it doesn't matter because they have a massive majority. And they will keep that massive majority so long as the right is divided. So I think you're absolutely correct. The most important issue, the one question that needs to be asked every single leadership contender is, what are you going to do to win back Reform voters, or to actually knit Reform and the Tory party back together? But if I may just say, Kemi Badenoch said this afternoon that her view of Reform is that it is not serious and not conservative. And this is part of the problem. Many Tories, you're different, but many Tories don't want to have some kind of coalition.
You see, one of the key things I thought Richard mentioned was trust. And that people don't trust the Conservatives.
No.
And it's very hard to see why that will change, particularly in relation to migration, where we obviously failed. And that's why I think it may be necessary to make a big offer to Reform to bring them into the tent.
Yeah.
Because people trust Nigel on migration.
I think also if it were to take the form of, say, a 5-pledge thing, where you say we will definitely do these 5 things as part of some sort of arrangement, I can see how people might begin to rebuild some trust around that. But as you say, the Tory brand is really very damaged. And right now they're trying to win back Reform people by implication. Rather than openly saying we want Reform voters back and we want to sound more like Farage, they're emphasising immigration in the case of Rob Jenrick and culture wars in the case of Kemi Badenoch. But I think until they are just honest and frank and say, we actually just need Reform back, I don't think they're going to be able to rebuild that.
Andy, as a friendly word of advice to the Tories, would you tell us to take Reform seriously, or do you think Kemi Badenoch's right?
I think, looking at their kind of shenaniganery at the moment with Tommy Robinson and their kind of splits on the very right of Reform and the way that the grassroots appear to be divided to the parliamentary leadership, I wouldn't particularly take them seriously as an actual organisation. They've got 5 MPs. They have no real responsibility. They can say whatever they want, but they're never going to see the government benches. So I think they're a bit of a fringe kind of excitement at the moment. Obviously, take into account the voters that they took at the last election, but I wouldn't take them seriously as a real organisation. Obviously, you want to win the voters, but I'd say leave the people out there.
All right, brilliant. Thank you very much to my panel.